So we've got our main element set up pretty well right here. We're going to add a little bit more code to this as we go. Just some simple boilerplate we can use to create some different layouts of a single column, two column, three column layout should be good. But let's first get our navigation bar working because that's really where we see the benefit of Skeleton. So let's come back to our code. And here in our template, we've already given the nav element this class of container, and we learned from styling the main element that in order to have columns, they have to be wrapped inside of a row. So what we're going to do now is instead of creating divs, we're going to leverage all the elements that are already here because we already have this nesting structure in place. And what we really want is for each of our list items to span a certain amount of columns within the grid. And in order to do that, we need to give our unordered lists a class of row. So I'm going to give that class equal to row to this unordered list, and then while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and do that with the footer as well because it's the same structure. And now I can come back up to my header, and I'm going to use the feature of my code editor that lets me have more than one cursor by holding down Command, and I'm going to click within each opening list item here and hit space and type class equals. And again, I can have two classes listed within the same attribute. I just can't have two class attributes on a specific element. And so this time I've got 5 buttons and I need this to add up to 12. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the first 4 buttons classes of 2 columns, so they each span 2 columns. And then the last button is going to span 4 so that they all add up to 12. So for this, I'm just going to do 2 columns, and then I'm going to update my last one here to 4. It's the resume download. I figure I'll just call attention to that since that's the one that's kind of my call to action on the page already based on how I've been styling it. And so now these 5 add up together to equal 12. They do need to all equal 12 for it to work. And if I save, come back to my page here, what we see now is that my buttons are all spanning across the top of the page. They line up with the container of the main element. And then once I get below 550 pixels, now before I get there, notice I do still have some work to do at these middle sizes because right now these are starting to overlap. So I'm going to need some custom CSS to address this. But for now, when I get down to 550 pixels or below, you see how they stack pretty nicely, and this looks okay. One of the things I might want to take care of is this space on either side. Once we get onto a more narrow device, we might want to lose these margins of auto so that it goes all the way to the end of the screen. But for now, this is a good start. The problem I've got now is that all of my navigation in my footer is stacking as well. And really, since these are just icons, I don't want them to ever stack. This doesn't look good. I want to make sure that they stay grouped together. So I'm going to be able to use Skeleton to get the desktop layout of that working, and then I'm going to need to override it beneath 550 pixels so that this doesn't happen. So let's go back to Sublime Text. And I've got 6 buttons in my footer, so I can put my cursor again at the beginning of each of my list items by just holding down Command or Control on a PC and clicking within the opening list items. And then I just need to type class equals. And now this time, since it's 6, 12 divided by 6 is 2. So each of these can span 2 columns each. And that should work out to be nice and even. And if I save my work and I come back here and reload, you see that that worked out really nicely. That was a whole lot easier than doing the random math that we were doing to try to do it manually within our CSS section. And it just handles it on its own. But the problem that we need to fix now is just that once we get beneath 550 pixels, these are still going to stack because that's what Skeleton is designed to do. So we want to take care of that. And we also want to fix our copyright statement over here. You notice it's kind of misbehaving a little bit. And that's because it also needs to be wrapped in a row, and it also needs to have a column layout applied to it. So I'm going to come back to my footer, and down here, see my paragraph here is not wrapped in a row. It's not wrapped in a container. It's got nothing helping to keep it positioned, and it's not really part of the navigation. So if I want to fix it, Should probably add another div with a class equal to row. And then I should close that div just before the main element closes. So wrap it around my paragraph. I'm going to make sure to indent my paragraph so I can see that it's a child of that div that I just created. And then I'm going to give the paragraph a class equal to 12 columns. And see if that takes care of the way the paragraph is behaving at these smaller screen widths. We shouldn't see much of a change until below 550, but now we see it's behaving, it's staying put, and it's doing what we would expect it to do. So everything's looking pretty good now for this layout, with exception to the footer icon stacking like that. So let's go ahead and take care of those. And what we need to do for that is to write some custom CSS. I'm going to do this in browser so that you can see it happen in real time. And I'm going to make sure my screen's narrow enough to where we can see this here. So the problem is that beneath 550 pixels, Skeleton is designed to have all columns span 100% of the width. So let's take a look at that. When we look at our 2 columns list item here, we can see that by default, they are set to have 100% width at this specific screen size. Now, if we start to size up, and Skeleton is written in what's called a mobile first design, so all of its standard classes assume a mobile device, and then it uses media queries to address anything above the size of a mobile device. So if I look at my 2 column list item here, I can see that at a min width of 550 pixels, this 2 column div is set to, or this 2 column class is set to span 13.33 and so on percent of the space. So what I need to do is actually override the standard one where it's set to have all of these span 100% width at 550 pixels and below. So I can do that with a media query. I would consider 550 pixels to be a breakpoint that I need to target. So I'm going to do this in my style sheet in browser so you can see it take place. And what I recommend we do is keep all of our media queries organized at the bottom here. And it does help to pick a specific order. So from most narrow to widest, or from widest to most narrow is the best choice here. But in this case, I just need to start with a media query, and that begins with @media. I think it's and screen. Or is it @media screen and? I think I had it right the first time. And then you put in parentheses max width 550 pixels. And then we need to open up some curly braces, and that holds all of the declarations that belong inside the media query. So after that, we want to indent to the left for every full declaration, which is, like this would be a whole declaration right here. We want to indent to the left so that we are sure that we've closed this curly brace, or that can cause some problems. And what we want to do here is to take that same value that a 2 column span has at desktop width and apply that here to override what's happening in the Skeleton style sheet. So the way I would do that is to choose, now I only want to do this in the footer though. I actually want Skeleton to work like Skeleton everywhere else. So what I need to do is call out anything in the footer, a child in the footer that has classes of 2 and columns. And then I want to give that a width of 13 point, and it had 3 like 8 times, right, percent. And you can see how those jumped up to where they're supposed to be. There's still a little bit of work I'd want to do layout wise because they're not centered right now. So I might be able to handle that by also doing let's try align items center. I'm not sure that's going to work. These are relatively new classes to me as well. So that didn't quite work. Let's just do text align. And we might have to step out of these classes of the 2 columns here to get them to center. Let's try styling their parent, because these are list items. So let's try styling footer UL. And try text align center. Still not quite working. Let's see what's causing them to pull to the left. It's actually this float property right here on skeleton. I think that's having them float to the left. Let's see if I override it. Nope, we want to keep that. And we still have our text align center. It's just not being applied. You know, I think part of it might actually be the 13.333. It's just a little bit too narrow. Yeah, let's try maybe 16%. It's getting a little bit closer, so I think this will be the 16.67 or 16.6. Yeah, that we had before. And let's see if that holds. Yeah. All right, so that fixes our footer. Everything's looking pretty good. So we just have a couple more things to do before this template is what I would consider ready for prime time. Let me go ahead and add that to my style sheet real quick before I forget. So I'm going to come back and let's try a save as real quick. Come back to my style sheet from designing in browser. Come to sources, find my style sheet and do a right click, save as. And overwrite my current style sheet. And I keep getting this caution sign that if I hover over it, it says that changes were not saved to the file system. That usually just means you have unsaved changes, but it normally responds once you do save them. And I can see that they're here, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. It might just be a Chrome bug. But as long as I can see it in my style sheet here, all is well, especially if I don't see a closed circle here, but an X. The closed circle means I have unsaved changes, and the X up here means that everything's good. So everything should be in pretty good shape now. The next thing that we need to talk about is just setting up some extra things in our template so that we can use it a little bit more effectively when we start creating new pages, and also applying all the changes that we just made to the style guide page as well. So we'll cover that in one more video, and then we should be pretty good to go.